Okay, well, hello guys. Hello again. And sorry about that previous session. We had some technical problems, but hopefully this time it'll go over a lot quicker and clearer because we're going to use a different program. Okay, so let's start by reviewing the vocabulary. Okay, remember that for the vocabulary, we had jobs as well as workplaces. Those are the things that we have to review from Unit 7. Okay, so let's start reviewing that by looking at some images that we have. Okay, so the vocabulary that we have is right here. Okay, so for the first person that we have, let's see the first person that is working with some brushes. Okay, that person right here, that's an artist. Okay, that's the first part of our vocabulary. Second person that we have is a mechanic. He's working on a car. Third person is doing some cleaning, so that's a cleaner. Fourth person is apparently in a gym, so he must be a fitness trainer. Next person, we have this person right here who's working with teeth, so he is a dentist. Next person is driving, so he must be a driver. The other two people in the image, we have this guy over here and the lady next to him. They're both working on a couple of ladies' hair, so they must be hairdressers. Next person working on the construction site of someplace is, well, obviously an engineer. Then we have a pilot operating an airplane. We have a lady interviewing another person, so she is a journalist. Okay, after that, we have another lady who is giving some travel papers to a person, to a customer, so she is a travel agent. And finally, for the last job, we have a person who is taking a phone call and writing some notes. She must be a secretary, okay? These are the people that we have to review. Also, we have other words that we can review in just a second, okay? And we will review them. All right, so let's see. Okay. Now, for this exercise, we're going to distinguish between a workplace and the job. The job is the person, the workplace is, well, the school, the office, whatever place the person is working at. Okay, so we start with nurse. We didn't look at that in the vocabulary, but we know that a nurse works in a hospital. Okay, so she helps people in a hospital. She's not a doctor, okay, but she assists doctors as well. We have a nurse, and then her workplace is a hospital. Okay, then we have a doctor who is also part of a hospital staff. After that, we got, let's see here, we have school. And at a school, we're going to have teachers. Okay, a teacher working at a school, that's pretty familiar vocabulary. Then we have a shopping center or shop center. Okay, that's where we're gonna find shop assistants. Okay, and also there are some restaurants in the shopping centers, but there's still the places. Okay, well, we got this backwards. Okay, the shop center is a place, the shop assistant is the person. We have the farmer. That's the person who works on a farm. Then there's the waiter or the waitress. Okay, they tend tables at a restaurant. It's right here, at a restaurant. Okay, and alongside waiters and waitresses, we have chefs working at restaurants. Then finally, we have at a hotel, we have receptionists working, as well as chambermaids. Now remember, chambermaids are the people who do room service. They come to your room and they pick it up, they clean everything, and they give you clean sheets. All right? So this is a little bit of practice for the vocabulary. Let's check the next thing that we have in store. Hopefully this will go a lot sooner than it did that first time. We have this exercise right here. Let's see. Okay, so for the exercise, let's see here. We have an artist. We have that as a person who draws and paints pictures. Let's see now. A cleaner. What did a cleaner do? A cleaner cleans rooms in buildings. All right, a cleaner cleans rooms in buildings. Let's see. For a driver, what does a driver do? Well, a driver drives people to different places. An engineer, we have another one. An engineer, we talked about engineers designing and building machines, bridges, or roads. Okay, they oversee the construction of a machine, a bridge, or a road. All right. What about this next one? A fitness trainer. What does a fitness trainer do? A fitness trainer, well, he helps people get in shape. So he helps them to get fit and strong. Let's see now. For the next one, we have a journalist. A journalist, what does that person do? Well, he or she writes articles for newspapers, websites, etc. Okay, a hairdresser. All right, we saw that in the image as the couple of people who were, okay, they were cutting people's hair. Then after that, we have a mechanic. A mechanic works with cars. That's a word that is pretty similar to the one we have in Spanish. So, a mechanic, let's see, we have him working, fixing cars. So that'll be right here, fixing cars. All right. Then the next one up, let's see, we have a pilot. A pilot, what is a pilot going to do? Well, he flies planes. So that's letter E. What about a dentist? A dentist, well, similar to the word that we have in Spanish. That's very easy to understand. So a dentist works with people's teeth. He takes care of their dental health, fixes people's teeth. All right, then after that, we got a secretary. Well, she writes letters, organizes meetings, and makes phone calls. All right, very good. And then finally, we have a travel agent. Well, that's also simple to understand. It's an agent that helps you travel. So let's see. She's going to help people plan their holiday. Okay, so much for the vocabulary. Let's move on to the grammar. So the first thing that we have are modals of obligation. Okay, so the modals of obligation that we have are must, mustn't, and have to, and don't have to. Okay, but technically, let's see here, must and mustn't as well as have to, okay, they denote some kind of obligation, okay? They presuppose that there is an obligation of doing or not doing something, okay? In the case of mustn't, you have the obligation to not do it. When we talk about don't have to, or in the case of third person singular, doesn't have to, we're talking about things that are optional, okay? They are not an obligation. They don't impose an obligation on us. They're an option. We can make the decision. We have the decision of whether we want to do it or not, and it's not going to have any sort of repercussions. Okay, let's take an example. Let's look at an example, sorry. Let's take a look at an example. For a mechanic, we can say that his obligation is fixing cars, and he is not permitted, he has the obligation to not steal car parts from his clients. Also, it is not necessary for the mechanic to wear a uniform. Okay, that's an option that he has. He can wear a uniform or he can not wear a uniform. So how do we interpret this? Let's see the final sentences that we have for these. If he has an obligation of fixing cars, we say that a mechanic must fix cars, that is the obligation, or a mechanic has to fix cars. When he is not permitted to do something, he has that obligation imposed on him of restraining himself from doing something. We say a mechanic mustn't steal car parts. Okay, that's the use of mustn't. It's still an obligation imposed on somebody, an obligation to restrain ourselves from doing something. When something is not necessary, we say a mechanic doesn't have to wear a uniform. Well, that's the resulting example of the information that I gave of something that is not necessary. A mechanic doesn't have to wear a uniform. Okay, those are the examples that we have. Now, for the structure, we always use must, have to, mustn't, and don't have to with VSF, which is a verb in simple form. Okay, remember that. It's a verb in simple form after must, after have to, after mustn't, or after don't have to. Okay, let's take a look at some examples that we have here to see what I mean, okay? In the first sentence, we read, a farmer must to take care of his farm. Well, that is going to be incorrect. We can't say must to. We say that must continues with the verb in simple form. There is no to. Okay. Take a look at this at the second sentence. Sorry, a travel agent has to give you all the details of your trip. Now I crossed out has to give because we said that we need a verb in simple form. Has to give, not has to gave. Gave is in past. We need the verb in simple form. Has to give. Okay. For the third sentence, a nurse doesn't have perform surgery when there are no doctors. Again, this is incorrect. We use doesn't have to, and then after that, we use the verb in simple form. Now, those are some common mistakes that we have with these modals of obligation. When we make questions with them, for must, we can use it in positive or negative, must or mustn't. And then after that, we add the subject and then the verb in simple form to formulate our question, such as in the example, must the pilot fly alone? Okay. Now, if we want to make a question with have to, we start with do or does. And then we continue with the subject. Have to, no conjugation there, please, ever. And then the verb in simple form, such as in the case of, does the pilot have to fly alone? Okay, now the two questions that I set as an example are basically the same thing. They're transmitting the same idea. There's no real difference between must and have to. Okay, some people will tell you that must imposes a greater obligation and have to is a lesser obligation, or that maybe must is something that you think, have to is something that other people expect from you. Don't get wrapped up in all of that, okay? Don't worry about it. It's basically the same thing. Must and have to are both talking about an obligation. Sorry. They're basically synonyms. Okay, now when we want to make a WH question word an open question, we simply add one of the WH question words before these structures. So we can say, when must the pilot fly alone? Or when does the pilot have to fly alone? Okay, that's pretty simple. Just adding those WH question words before the structure. Okay, such as when must the pilot fly alone? When does the pilot have to fly alone? All right, for present perfect, which is the second part of the grammar for our review of Unit 7. In present perfect, now the concept is kind of difficult to grasp, but please bear with me. I'm going to try to make this as simple as possible. Imagine that we have a timeline, and in the middle, obviously, we have the present. So that means before that, we have the past, and after that point, we have the future. If we mention something in simple past, we give a sentence in simple past, such as in the example, the farmer bought a chicken, well, that would be a very specific time in the past. It's finished. It's an action that is finished in the past at a specific point, okay? Now, just as a reference, if we say the farmer will buy a chicken, well, that's going to be in the future, correct? A specific time in the future. For example, in May of 2022. Now we come to it, present perfect. The farmer has bought a chicken. It's not in simple past, so it can't be with a specific point in the past, but it is something that is finished before the present. Technically, present perfect is something that is done in the past. It's finished in the past, but with no specification. That's the important part. There is no specification, of when this action was done. There is no specifics. Okay, there are no specifics. Okay, the farmer has bought a chicken. We don't know. Was that yesterday? We don't know. Was that this year? We don't know. Was that last year? We don't know. Okay, we don't have specifications for present perfect of when the action was finished in the past. Now, for the structure, we use have, haven't, has, or hasn't, okay, as the auxiliary, and then we add a verb in PP, which is past participle, okay? Now, don't get, let's see here. Sorry. That's past participle, okay? We use, for example, I have eaten a hamburger. You haven't done your homework. He has seen that movie, etc. Okay, now a lot of you get confused with present perfect and then have to from the obligation modals. The difference is that here, we don't use to. Also, the verb is not in simple form. Okay, that's the big difference. If you ever get confused, you get tangled up and you don't know which is which, just take a look at those two details. All right, to formulate questions, we have or has plus the subject plus a verb in past participle. Okay, to formulate that question, such as in the example, have you eaten? Okay, have or has, as I said in the previous slide, is our auxiliary. Okay, have or has in present perfect is the auxiliary. We can't use do or does, never. Okay, now if we want to make these questions open questions, we want to transform them into that, we just put that WH question word before our structure. What have you eaten? Who have you eaten? If you're a zombie. Where have you eaten? Why have you eaten? How have you eaten? Now, I omitted the WH question word when. Why didn't I put when? Because, well, if we use the question word when, we would need a specific time. When have you eaten? That would be contradictory because then we would be talking about a specific point in the past. It doesn't make sense. So let's practice now with the grammar. Okay, for this first part, we have the practice of obligation modals, have to and must. Okay, so let's start. It reads, I'm a hairdresser. I start work early. So we have options. I mustn't start work early or I don't have to start work early. Now remember, mustn't is when you say that person is not permitted to do that. But I think a hairdresser has the permission to do it. So it's simply something that is not necessary. It's an option. I don't have to work early. I don't have to start working early. Okay, so that's saying it's not an obligation. It's his decision. It's an option. But I have to work long hours. Now, as I said before, here we're going to pay close attention to this right here. Oh, my mistake. Right here, but. Okay, that's what we're going to take a look at. But it's a contrast So when we say that first something is negative and we have a contrast, then we would need something positive. I have to work long hours. Next sentence. In the salon, I wash and cut people's hair. He's a hairdresser, so that is his obligation. He has to. All right. I have to wash and cut people's hair. I be on time. Again, that's an obligation. He decides to start working late, but when he sets that time to open up his shop, he must respect it. So it's an obligation. I must be on time. Okay, and I have to, sorry, no, it's not have to. It's not have to, because if you take a look at these things that we have on the side, these unfriendly or rude, okay, if it's unfriendly or rude, well then that's something that he shouldn't do, right? It's a bad idea. He doesn't have permission to do it, so I mustn't be unfriendly or rude. We move on. The customers, be happy when they leave. Well, it's not an obligation for them to leave, so it's not necessary. The customers don't have to be happy when they leave. Okay, now let's practice with some questions. We have three questions that we're going to practice. We're going to use have to make these questions. Okay, so for number 3, let's see. We got, oh, right there. Okay, that's better. For number 3, you work hard at school. All right. So as I said, when we make the question with have to, we start with do or does. So here's the answer. Do you have to work hard at school? We start with do, then the subject, then have to with the verb in simple form. All right. What about number 4? You do a lot of homework. Again, we start with do or does, in this case do. Do you have to, and then the verb in simple form. Do with a complement. A lot of homework. Finally, you do jobs at home. Do you have to do jobs at home? All right, well, enough practice for this. Let's practice now some present perfect. Here we have a text where we have to decide what the correct answer is going to be. So this is focusing on present perfect. It reads, Farad Sidwala from Mumbai, India is only 18, but he, and then we have our options. He's achieved, he achieved, or he achieved more than other 18-year-olds. Okay, so we're going to use he's achieved. This is a contraction. Okay, this is a contraction of he has. He has achieved, he's achieved more than other 18-year-olds. Okay, we move on. Farad has built, has builded, or built. Now, for present perfect, we're going to use the past participle, and the past participle of build is built. Okay, and we have to use have or has before that. Farad has built a communication company from nothing, and now 42 people work for him. How? Here we have a question. Look at the question mark that we have over here. How he do, how has he done, or how has he did? Now this is incorrect. Has he did, because we have the verb in simple past. We need the verb in past participle. How has he done it? His parents, it's plural, so we use have supported him all the way, but it hasn't been easy. Remember, the negative is with hasn't, not a simple not. We need have or has for the negative. He's made or he's made. Let's see here. Well, we need past participle, so we're going to use made. He's made mistakes. Farad says that his success hasn't changed him. Okay, again, have or has with past participle. But his mistakes have taught him many important things. All right, so that's it for the practice that we have. Okay, and I think that's it also for the class. So next week, we're going to take a look at the vocabulary from Unit 8. And if you have any questions, be sure to make them in our next tutoring session next week on the Servo Escolar webpage, okay, at 11:15. See you then.